Salisbury steak with a twist. Salisbury steak with real steak.
Yeah,
over
baby.
mashed potatoes and gravy. Some of the ingredients I used in this: about a pound and a half of ground beef. I made some pre-made gravy so I don't have to worry about it later. A sweet onion, mushrooms of your own preference, a mixture of seasonings depending on how you like yours, and finalized with an egg and breadcrumbs. Seasoning wise, I did a little bit of Montreal steak seasoning, a little bit of seasoned salt, a little bit of garlic powder. But you can do it any way you like. Here I'm starting with a skirt steak. It has a lot of intermuscular fats,
baby.
which is nice. A little bit too much on the outside for me, so I'm cutting a little bit off. So I started off with this skirt steak from the local superstore. I'm not gonna say any name, W is garbage. So of course, it wasn't the greatest cut, and a lot of excess fat I did not need or want. So I began trimming off as much as possible. Then I sliced with the grain. There's also a trick I can show you later, but for now I'm cutting with the grain, then I'm gonna cut it into small fibers. Those fibers will fall apart in the gravy and not in the patty, and I'll show you how to do that later. But first I started with the skirt steak. Get it
Yeah,
prepped.
baby.
Then comes the veggies. And for this, I did a little bit of onion, a little bit of white mushrooms. Simple, good flavors. Wasn't looking for nothing incredible. And for the longest time, I've eaten Salisbury steak, and I enjoy the flavor of Salisbury steak, but I've always wondered, why just ground beef? So I tried it with a little bit of steak.
Yeah, baby.
Sliced it down, add it into the ground beef, sliced it down, add it into the gravy, let it fall apart within the gravy so you have little strands everywhere. And it's hard to describe the steak and the gravy. It's kind of like more like a pot roast kind of steak where it's juicy, tender, fall apart. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm going a little bit slow. I'm out of practice, especially on camera. But I promise to get back into it. And to do something a little different, I've created a side view while you're watching me slowly cut up. You can actually view the things cooking. And here I had a little bit of oil, onions, and the mushrooms sauteing down, making sure they don't stick, give them a nice little caramelization, toss in your steak, and then season, but don't over season. The key trick is you can under season anything and put more in. If you over season, there's no coming back. So go lightly, taste, check. You just don't want your food tasting like pure salt. Here I just keep also turning it, making sure it doesn't stick. That little skirt steak is incredibly
Yeah,
thin.
baby.
It's gonna cook down very fast, so it only needs a few minutes. So the best thing to do is always start off with the vegetables, then the meat. Stir it for a couple of minutes. Once you see it's all nice and browned, pull it out. Here I'm cutting up the onions, and this was a very pungent onion. I know, because before I could finish cutting it up, it had me crying. But you want a good flavor of onion anyway, so that's what I chose. And my knife skills a little bit off. It's been a couple of months, everybody, you know. It's good to be back. And I believe the steak and onions have definitely got a nice brown on them by now. Of course, as you can see, I continuously stir to keep it from burning while still keeping the flame hot. That's the trick. Alright, definitely time to pull my face out of the video and go get me a towel for my watery eyes. So now with the ground beef, make the patties time. Here I started with about a pound and a half of ground beef, mixed in generous amount of the seasonings, not all of the seasonings. Then I went secondly with some breadcrumbs. Don't pour in all of your breadcrumbs, just a good portion, and then you begin mixing it together. I've never truly understood the difference between Salisbury steak and meatloaf, because they're pretty, they're almost similar. Very, very similar. But nevertheless, here you see me mixing and kneading. Oh, and this is something I wanted to show on video. When you cut with the grain of the steak or against the grain, you can come up with two different cuts. If you cut with the grain and long slices, When you slice those slices down, they'll fall apart a lot easier. If you cut against the grain and roll it up to that in the same context, when you begin slicing it, it'll fall apart. The idea is, depending on how you want your steak later, you can either have long strands that somewhat bind together or short strands that fall apart easily. Now that the steak and veggies are finished cooking, you're going to see in the small view beginning to make the patties, even though I'm just starting to mix the patties on the main screen. The idea is just give you an overview of both so you're not sitting there bored looking at me. Here I'm cutting up the steak to add to the gravy. Honestly, I didn't need that much steak, but I just went ahead with a little bit. I want a whole lot of extra steak. Nevertheless, now that they have cooled, and the key word is cooled, I begin mincing down the steak and the onions and the mushrooms into very small pieces to mix them with the ground beef. And in the mini window, you can see the patties are beginning to cook. Here I'm seasoning them, and like I said before, don't over season. You can under season and come back. Too much seasoning, you can't take back. That's all she wrote after that. Main window, I'm mincing down the once now cooled steak, onions, and mushrooms into small pieces. You want it really small. Too big and it won't mix together. Fat kid just ate a piece of steak. If the steak and everything is too big, it won't hold itself together easily. So cut it down to small pieces, and then we begin mixing your steak, your veggies, your breadcrumbs, your seasoning, and your egg. Once you got it nice, thoroughly incorporated, I made for about 1/3 pound patties. Maybe about half pound patties. I'm the fat kid right now. Yeah. And on the side, you can see, and I've got that beautiful bark, that searing, that Milo reaction, the stuff that tastes good to us and we don't know why. I've flipped them. Now I'm taking time making sure the other side gets the same effect, but also too because of all the fats. I'm literally leaning it so it falls into the fat and cooks more towards the center of the meat. Some people like their meat raw. I like mine's medium well. I do not like much blood. Once you got yours thoroughly incorporated like I did, I took time and about 1/3 of a pound to, let's be honest, I'm a fat boy, about 1/2 pound patties, but they're going to render down anyway. Start measuring them out, then I flatten them out, try to make them into a patty as much as I possibly can by hand. And as you can see on the other screen, they're cooking. They got the nice bark, the nice crispness on it. I can't give you a great time frame. I do it by eye, but be honest with you, in about 15-20 minutes, those patties should be done at a nice heat. Once they're done, pull them out, drain away that fat, toss it, you don't need it. Some people always say fat is flavor and they love fat. Fat is also high cholesterol. Fat is also heart attacks. A little fat, okay. Drinking pure fat, that's not me. But anyway, here I'm doing the slap method when it comes to making patties. I'll start by rolling it into a ball. I'll start flattening it out in my hand so it gets somewhere flat, as you can see. Then I'll take time and roll it on its side to try to make it as round as possible. I'm trying to create a perfectly good patty. If you want to create the perfect patty, put it in the freezer. Let it get a little bit cooled, meat be more stronger, and you can do it easier. And here you can see I begin with the gravy. I mixed in the remaining amounts of the steak, the onions, and mushrooms.
Yeah, baby.
Because to be honest with you, at this point, the patties are already done, even though I'm showing them cooking on the other screen. I just wanted to show people both sides of it. Once you got it there, just start mixing together. Fat boy just stole a piece of steak.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, that steak. Okay, here's my patties. There's my gravy. I got it at a low to simmer. Of course, I'm shaking it for no reason whatsoever, but you want to cook it slowly. Don't try to make this in 15 minutes. I literally took about an hour and a half, 45 minutes, came back, turned them, maybe an hour, then turned them. You want to give it time. All those wonderful flavors need to get to know each other. For me, I cooked it on a low simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. Came back, checked my gravy, then you turn your patties. Of course, they're not completely submerged, and I'm not going to sit there and tell you to cook it for an hour and a half on one side, because the other side won't get any love, any melting of flavor. So turn it over, keep it moist, keep the other side moist. Because if you just make this and eat it in 15 minutes, the flavors won't finish blending together. The gravy wouldn't thicken enough. Give it time, give it love. Trust me, it's worth it. And for God's sake, I had this with mashed potatoes. If you don't know how to make mashed potatoes, basically boil some potatoes, add some milk, and mince it down. Mush it down. I'm gonna pray for you. But only way to describe this, I got the Salisbury, but also got little chunks of actual steak in the patty, which makes me want to chew on it a little bit more. It's hard to explain. And then I find myself eating all of the potatoes and gravy because the potatoes and gravy had little small strands of steak in it as well. So it's more like patty plus steak everywhere than just patty and gravy and mashed potatoes. It's hard to explain. Try it at home, see if you like it. It's not hard to make. So like I said, mince down the steak and everything in small pieces. You don't want humongous pieces because it makes it hard for the patty to stay together. After that, it's just fat boy. And I know it's been forever, everybody, but between COVID, I've had some loss of family members. I took a break from making cooking videos, but I'm back. And I'm back to make people laugh and have some smiles and good food.